Hello friends, I'm Gopikanandhana. Today, I would like to examine one of the most important concepts in economics, that is the determinants of elasticity of supply. Before going to a subject, we have to consider some of the relevant questions which form the base of this concept. The first question we have to take into account is, what is supply? Supply is the willingness and ability of the producers to create goods and services and take them to the market. Law of supply is a fundamental principle of economic theory which states that keeping other factors constant, an increase in the price results in an increase in the quantity supplied. The second significant question is the price elasticity of supply. It measures the degree of responsiveness of the supply for a commodity to a change in its price. It refers to the extent to which the supply of a product increases or decreases as a result of change in its price. There are 5 degrees of elasticity of supply. The first one is perfectly elastic supply. Here, the elasticity is indefinite and the supply curve SS will be horizontal straight line parallel to the x-axis. The second one is perfectly inelastic supply. Here, the elasticity of supply is equal to 0 and supply curve SS will be vertical straight line parallel to the y-axis. If the price of a commodity increases by 10% and as a result of it, quantity of the supply also increases by 10%, it is the case of unitary elastic supply and elasticity is equal to 1. When the proportionate change in supply is more than proportionate change in the price, it is called as relatively elastic supply. And when proportionate change in supply is less, it is called as relatively inelastic supply. Then, shall we move on to a subject, the factors determining the price elasticity of supply? There are many factors that affecting the price elasticity of supply, like the nature of industry, constraints, nature of commodities, time, technique, cost of production, producers' expectations, and so on. The most important factor that affecting the price elasticity of supply is nature of constraints. For example, the rubber trees take 15 years to grow, so it is impossible to increase the supply of rubber overnight. The other factor that affecting the elasticity of supply is risk taking. The willingness of the entrepreneurs to take risk also affects the price elasticity of supply. This, in its turn, depends on the system of incentives and disincentives. If, for example, the marginal rates of tax are very high, a price rise will not evoke much response among the producers. Another important factor affecting the price elasticity of supply is the nature of industry under consideration. This will indicate the extent to which production can be increased in response to an increase in the price of the product. If inputs can be easily found existing market prices, as in the textile industry, then output can be greatly increased if price rises slightly. This means that supply is fairly elastic in textile industry. On the other hand, if the production capacity is severely limited, as in gold mines, then even a very large increase in the price of gold will lead to very small increase in the production. This means that the supply of the gold is fairly inelastic. As with the demand elasticity, the most important determinant of the elasticity of supply is the availability of substitutes. In the context of supply, substitute goods are those to which the factors of production can most easily be transferred. For example, a farmer can easily move from growing wheat to producing jute. Of course, the mobility of factors is very important for such substitution. As a great general rule, the more easily factors can be transferred from the production of one good to that of the another, the greater the elasticity of supply. As in the case of demand, elasticity of supply also depends upon the definition of the commodity. The narrowly a commodity is defined, the greater its elasticity of supply. For example, it is easier for a tailor to transfer resources from producing red skirts to green skirts than from skirts to men's trousers. Another factor that affecting the price elasticity of supply is the cost of attracting resources. If supply is to be increased, it is necessary to attract resources from other industries. This usually involves raising the prices of these resources. As their price rises, the cost of production also increases. So, supply becomes relatively inelastic. If the resources can be obtained cheaply, then supply is likely to be relatively elastic. These considerations become very important at times of full employment when the only available factors of production are those which can be attached from other industries and uses. The elasticity of supply is also likely to vary at different prices. Thus, when the price of a commodity is relatively high, the producers are likely to be supplying near the limits of their capacity and would therefore be unable to make much response to a still higher price. When the price is relatively low, however, producers may well have surplus capacity which a higher price would induce them to use. The ease with which factors of production can be moved from one use to another will affect the price elasticity of supply. The higher the mobility of factor services, the greater will be elasticity. Time also exerts considerable influence on the elasticity of supply. Supply is more elastic in the long run than in the short run. The reason is easy to find out. The longer the time period, the easier it is to shift resources among products following a change in their relative prices. From this, we can conclude by saying that not one, but there are many factors that affecting the price elasticity of supply. Thank you.